Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. We're going to give it just another minute to allow for others to hop in, and then we'll get started. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining, and welcome to the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference. This is Jessica from SMA's Family Support Department, and we thank you all so much for joining us for the Healthy Nutrition Strategies for Adults with SMA session. We are so incredibly grateful to our national presenting sponsors, Biogen, Genentech, and Novartis Gene Therapies for their incredible support of this year's Virtual SMA Conference. Please note that all lines are muted other than for the speakers. But if you do have any questions, please find the chat conversation tab located on the right-hand side of your screen. You can submit questions throughout the session using this feature, and then we have a Q&A set for the end of this session, and we'll try to answer as many of these questions as we can during that time. And now we'd like to introduce our speakers, Stacy Tarrant with Boston Children's Hospital, Laura Watney with Children's Hospital of Colorado, and Becky Hurst-Davis with Intermountain Healthcare. So Becky, take it away. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Jessica. Hello, and I want to tell all of you, I'm so excited to be for us to be discussing adult nutrition at this conference. Don't be afraid that we have children's next to our names. I do see adults. I do see adults and have seen adults with SMA. I wanted to just give a little bit of a background. I have over 12 years of experience working with adults and children with SMA. Stacy Tarrant has over 13 years of experience, and Laura Watney has 10 years of experience. So I welcome, their comments and answers in our question and answer session. So we have several topics that I wanted to make sure that we went over today. Number one, maintaining a healthy weight, and then healthy eating with swallowing issues, how to stock a healthy pantry, and how to set yourself up for success with healthy meals and snacks, and also some good numbers to know for adult nutrition health. Okay, so the first topic I want to go over is maintaining a healthy weight. So the goal for adults is really weight maintenance, and that's weight maintenance at a healthy weight. So if you are overweight, this could mean, maybe making sure that you're maintaining, or maybe, working on moderation to be at a healthy weight. Or if you're underweight, it could be building up your calories and nutrition to get to your healthy set point weight. How we do this. So how do we get to a healthy weight? So I know that these are things that we hear all the time, but they are so important. Variety and moderation is really key to maintaining a healthy weight. We also like to talk about eating a rainbow of colors. So we have a rainbow of colors that we look at. So the reason why we look at a rainbow of colors is because we want to make sure that we have a good variety of nutrients, phytochemicals, antioxidants that are available through different color foods of the rainbow. So for example, if you're eating red, food that's red, such as like a tomato, you're getting lycopene, which can help prevent some cancers. Or if you're eating purple blue foods, those have, a phytonutrient such as anthocyanin, which helps to protect our cells. Orange or yellow foods have carotenoids, which can help with eye and visual health. Green foods also have a bunch of different phytonutrients. You'll often see people recommending to eat the leafy greens, and it's because they just have a variety of nutrients in them. One other thing that we'll often talk to people about is choosemyplate.gov. If you haven't been to that website before, that gives a lot of healthy tips about portion sizes and amount of food groups that would be recommended for certain calorie ranges. So if you haven't before, I recommend that you look at choosemyplate.gov. One thing that I really like about this is the My Plate. This has replaced the My Pyramid. For those of you who remember the My Pyramid, the My Plate kind of shows what a healthy plate would look like at every meal. So half of your plate is fruits and vegetables. The other half, you have about a quarter, which would be grains, preferably whole grains, and then healthy proteins as a quarter, and then some sort of dairy. And I'm saying dairy because it may not actually be a milk dairy. It could be something else that is a calcium containing beverage. We also strongly recommend, to limit added sugars. I know that we all know this, and it's also something that is really helpful to do is to look at a nutrition label and see the added sugar. So there are some foods that have sugars naturally containing, and that's not what we recommend limiting. We recommend limiting those added sugars. So you're going to find added sugars in sweets, some sweetened cereals, but the natural sugar that's in a fruit, we don't have that the body can more easily regulate and is an additional sugar. One other way to maintain a healthy weight is to move. So movement as you are able to, no matter your circumstances, and sometimes it helps to work with a physical therapist to help you find some movements that are good for your range of motion and good to help you build your strength. When we're maintaining healthy weight, like I talked about in the beginning, sometimes if you're overweight, there are things that you can do to help maintain or kind of slowly lose a little bit of weight. And that would be looking at a smaller plate. And so instead of a big dinner plate, sometimes we're decreasing our plate size to still do a My Plate. We also, a lot of times it's easy to add calories and fluids. So if you're drinking sugar sweetened beverages such as sodas, or if you're adding a lot of extras to your coffee in the morning, that can add calories that don't necessarily add nutrients or nutrition. So we often recommend that you hydrate with water. That's always a great strategy. If you don't like plain water, there are things that you can do to freshen up your water, such as putting lemons in your water, or cucumbers in your water, frozen grapes in your water, and sometimes mashing them up also helps to flavor your water. They also have water flavorings that you can add that are also a great way to drink more water if you don't like plain water. Another way to help if you're overweight is to fill up on fiber containing foods. So fiber containing foods, we have fruits, variety of vegetables, whole grains. So this would be like whole wheat, oats, variety of grains. And then beans and lentils are also a good way to fill up full. When you're eating fiber and you're drinking water, it helps you to feel fuller. And this can help with weight management. If you're underweight, sometimes you need to eat more. So you often want to eat 5 or 6 small meals daily. We can also add power packing to your foods. And so that just means making sure that your foods are more nutrient dense. So you're choosing higher calorie foods, you're adding foods with sauces or healthy oils, or choosing foods with fats. So for example, one that we often go to because it's easy for modified diets as well as are avocados. Adding some avocados to foods can also help with power packing. And then for underweight, we actually do the opposite of if you're overweight, and that is we're adding calories and fluids because those seem to be an easier way to add calories. So there are oral supplements, there are protein drinks, some people will make smoothies. So you're actually doing the opposite as far as calories and fluids. And if you want to know where you stand as far as how your eating measures up, you want to see, what nutrients you may be missing or short on, or what nutrients maybe you're getting more than enough of, it's it's helpful to use one of these popular tracking apps. So we have MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, MyNet Diary. There's a new one on the market that's called Start Simple with MyPlate, and that actually goes by food groups. So that's a nice strategy to kind of just see where you are as far as your food groups go, whereas one of the other apps might tell you more details, like, you know, calcium containing foods, or calcium containing numbers, or you know, where you're looking like for your magnesium intake, or where your calories are looking like. And what you're looking at just really depends on what you're wanting to work on. I know that for myself, when I'm looking at diet records for people who I see, we generally try to shoot for about 75% of the daily recommended reference intakes for adults, except for with bone health measurement. Bone health containing nutrients, for those I shoot for more, getting about 100% of the recommendations. One item that we'll see is always low in most Americans are potassium, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you try to increase your potassium containing foods, but you want to just use caution, because whatever you're maybe low in, if you can't eat it with foods, you want to talk with a provider, so either your dietitian or doctor or other healthcare provider, to see what actions you should take to help boost your intake, because there are some of these that we wouldn't, and we'll talk about supplements later, but there are some of these items that we would not supplement. So if you had a low potassium intake, that when you did this, you know, if you did an app, we don't recommend a potassium supplement. That can actually be really dangerous. But calcium, you know, something like calcium, if you're seeing you're not getting enough calcium intake, that's something that, you know, you want to look at calcium containing foods, and or talk with your provider about whether supplementation would be right for you. And we'll talk about that. One thing that I hear from often is how to eat healthy with swallowing issues. So swallowing is something that is our primary concern when we're first working with somebody with SMA, is we want to make sure that swallowing is safe. So if you have weakened swallowing muscles or difficulty chewing, this can cause concern for a safe swallow. What we look for, and what you should look for as well, is if you have increasing fatigue with eating, if you're coughing or choking with eating or just after eating, if you're spilling your food from your mouth or drooling from your mouth, if you have increased upper respiratory infections, these are all things that we might want to look a little bit further into a safe swallow. And ways that we can evaluate if you're swallowing safely would be a video fluoroscopy swallow study, or a fiber endoscopic study that looks at swallowing, or having a speech language pathologist help to evaluate your swallow. And depending on what those tests indicate, the speech language pathologist might recommend food modifications. One other thing that I would recommend, no matter what, if you're having some issues, is to get a consult from a speech language pathologist, because even if you may not need to do necessarily modifications, they can help with some ideas that would help you with your diet. What we'll often see with feeding difficulties is if you have trouble with hard to chew foods, with tough meats or sticky foods, there are things that we can do a little bit differently to help address that. Some people will have difficulties with thin liquids. There are ways to thicken liquids. What we always recommend is not to eliminate food groups if you can, but to be creative and modify the foods that you're eating. If you have meal fatigue or you're feeling full, after just eating a little amount, small amounts, like I said previously, small amounts, small meals throughout the day can often help. Nutrient dense foods for higher calories is helpful. Also, we talked about this before, oral supplements, those supplement drinks can help to get you more nutrition when you're tired of eating or feeling full. if you're self-feeding and you're having issues, there are adaptive things that you can do on the market, and a speech language pathologist or an occupational therapist can help you with this. Just a little bit about food modification. So we pulled from all the food groups just some ideas. And if you have other ideas of things that you do in your everyday life, you feel free to add it to the chat so that everybody can benefit from things that if you would like to share some modifications or things that you've done in the past to help. But if you're having troubles with tough meats, sometimes using a slow cooker and having slow cooked meats cut into small pieces can help for an easier to chew option. Scrambled eggs, tofu, yogurt, fish are all easier to chew and swallow. When we're looking at whole grains, if we moisten our breads, brown rice, quinoa, using whole grain macaronis or whole grain cut noodles, sometimes those are easier to swallow. When we're looking at fruits, we really want, if we can, if the skin is difficult to swallow, sometimes we'll peel the skin, have diced foods available, pureed fruits. One thing I really love are the flavored applesauce or different fruit purees that you can buy in the grocery stores now. Those are a really nice way to get a good variety of fruits and or vegetables in. For other vegetables, if you want to, you can shred really well, dice, mash different vegetables. And then again, we had kind of touched upon fluids earlier, but you can help thicken fluids, you can alternate solids, with fluids. Sometimes speech language pathologists will tell, people to, have a bite of food and then to drink a sparkling liquid to help with that swallow. There are oral nutrition supplements or purees that you can use to help with swallowing. Okay. So the one thing about healthy eating is setting up your environment for success. And if you have healthy foods available or accessible to you, you're more likely to eat healthy. I know that I'm not the only person who has been at work and not been able to have a break for lunch, and you don't want to run to the candy machine. If you have something available in your office or in your bag, that's something that you can eat instead of maybe eating an unhealthier snack. So we look at stocking a healthy pantry. You want to look at maybe whole grains, oats. I do want to mention I have asterisked both popcorn and nuts here. If you have chewing or swallowing issues, popcorn or nuts are maybe a more dangerous food. So please, if this is an issue for you, please use caution. But for others who don't have swallowing issues, these can be good snacks to have on hand. A whole grain pasta, stock your pantry with brown rice, whole grain crackers. For some people, if you need a grab and go, a meal replacement bar is also a good one. Having dried or canned beans available on your shelf, canned or pouches of tuna or salmon. Those are easy grab and go foods. Peanut butters, nut butters, canned fruit, canned vegetables. When you're looking at canned vegetables or tomato products, we're really looking at, and broths, we're looking at reduced sodium. You also want to have in hand some healthy oils. And then a good condiment to have on hand is mustard, because it can help to flavor things without adding a lot of extra calories. If you have other ideas for what you stock your pantry with, please feel free to add it to the chat. And then stocking in the refrigerator and the freezer, I always like to have fresh fruits and vegetables on hand. And I always put it in a location that's easy to grab and accessible. So oftentimes, and everybody sets up their own pattern that works for them, but we'll go to the grocery store on Saturday, we'll cut up our veggies into containers and our fruits into containers so that throughout the week we can just grab and go. In my household, you have to do what works best for you. Include leafy greens in your fridge. I like to use already washed, pre-washed mixed green bags so that I can just quickly prepare them. Lean meats and fish and poultry are good to have in your fridge. And then dairy, so low fat. So this can either be almond milk or, low fat milk or whatever is within your dietary restrictions. Yogurt is a good thing to have on hand. String cheese. I also like hummus is great because it is really easy to mix in with, you can have it on a pita. You can have it with some cucumber, or, it's a great grab and go. Pesto with olive oil is also a great thing that you can make a healthy meal really quickly. Frozen veggies or fruits and frozen lean meats and poultry and fish. That's always good to have on hand in the freezer in case you want to prepare a meal in a hurry. The thing that I like about frozen fruits and veggies is that these are often more affordable, and they're flash frozen. So what you're looking for, they're flash frozen, so this helps to preserve the nutrients. The one thing that you're looking at with frozen food items is you probably want it, the less processed, the better. So if you could have like frozen salmon that hasn't been breaded or modified in that way, it's probably healthier than something that has been breaded. Healthy meals and snacks on the go. So you always want to try to mix food items. This will help you feel fuller for longer and help keep your blood sugar stabilized. So if you're going to grab something with a protein, you probably want to grab something with a carbohydrate and fat. So some great items to have, apples and string cheese, hummus, carrots, if you're not having swallowing problems, or hummus and crackers, tuna, and whole grain crackers. And you want to keep these more shelf stable items in places that are accessible to you. So in your bag, in your car, in your office. These are all great things to help set you up when you're hungry and you might not have time to go and get a full meal. So a bunch of us piled on some of our fruits, some of our healthy recipe ideas. So we look at, eatright.org is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics website. They have some good ideas for meal planning and prep and some recipes, and we have the links here. My Plate does have some good recipes for healthy eating. Cooking Light has some recipes, as well as All Recipes have some 20-minute healthy meals. So we have the links here. You're welcome to go through. And I would be remiss in this talk about nutrition without talking about supplements. This is something I'm often asked about as a dietitian. What supplements should I get? And what is safe and what is not safe. The commonly used supplements that we use are calcium, vitamin D, and multivitamin and minerals. The most common recommended supplement forms are in pills, powders, liquid. The powders, sometimes we're having tablets that we're crushing into a powder and mixing them in with applesauce or something, so it's easier to swallow. I did not include gummies on this list, and I'll talk maybe a little bit more about that in a minute. Gummies can be a little bit harder to chew, and sometimes if you're looking at like a multivitamin, gummies might have less minerals, so you just want to make sure that you check the labels on those. If you are going to be supplementing, you want to avoid mega doses. You can have side effects if you're having high amounts of certain supplements. So for example, if you're getting too high of niacin, which is a B vitamin, it can actually cause flushing and itching. Too much calcium can actually cause kidney stones. If you're having too much iron supplementation, it can actually block the absorption of other nutrients. So you just want to really talk with your provider before you are investing in a dietary supplement. One thing that I always like to mention is that supplements don't follow the same guidelines as food and drugs. So one thing that I always check for when I'm looking for supplements is I'll check for the US Pharmacopoeia seal, also a consumer lab, or NSF international approvals on my supplements. That means that it may, it has been reviewed for accuracy. One other thing that I also recommend is to check your labels for what you're wanting to get. So, so sometimes you're looking at, if you're getting a multivitamin or you're getting a lot of vitamins, you want to make sure that you're not getting too much of a vitamin, and a dietitian or your healthcare provider can help you with that. I recently had a friend come to me who was pregnant and had just been diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia. And I said, well, show me your prenatal vitamin. And I was actually very shocked to see that the reason why she was deficient and had anemia, which can be common in pregnancy, but her prenatal supplement was a gummy and it did not have iron in it. And so you really want to check the labels and work with your healthcare provider if you're looking for certain things to be working on. You know, maybe you determines that you're lower in calcium. I will talk about that in just a minute. You just really want to work with your healthcare provider and make sure you're getting the right supplement for your situation. I also like to look at, you know, if we're looking at vitamin A, you know, in a multivitamin, we also, you know, we want to make sure that we, you know, most of the vitamin A is provided as beta carotene versus, you know, more of a preformed vitamin A, because you're getting a preformed vitamin A, you're more likely to have a, you know, you really want to watch out for toxicity. Whereas if you're getting your vitamin A from beta carotene, the most that's going to happen if you get too much beta carotene is you might have your skin turn a little bit orange, but it's not harmful. So those are things that we really want to be careful about with supplements. One other thing that I often will talk to people about are probiotics, and to consider those because probiotics have been shown to help improve the gut microbiome, and they'll help with digestive issues as well as can help with the immune function. And I do prefer from foods. If you're going to be using probiotics for a certain thing, you'll want to talk with your healthcare provider. And if you're using a supplement, you'll want to make sure that you're matching the strain of probiotic with what condition you're wanting help with. And so speak to your provider about that. One website that I really like is the Office of Dietary Supplements. I have the link here. They have little fact sheets of what you would need to know as a consumer. So this is always a great resource to kind of tell you a little bit more about supplements. Calcium and vitamin D, I have the recommendations here for teens and adults, calcium as well as vitamin D, and the vitamin D is in international units. So these are the recommended intakes. However, you may need more based on your labs of vitamin D. For calcium, the tips that we also, you know, often will use is to break up in doses of about 200 to 300 milligrams, because if you're having too much at a time, your body can't absorb it. Also, if you're taking calcium, you want to take that away from iron and fiber if you're taking iron and fiber. I do want to talk just quickly about special diets. As a dietitian, we're often asked about fad diets. How you kind of define a fad diet is it's one that promotes quick weight loss. It may not be well researched, especially related to SMA. So you want to always use caution with diets that eliminate foods, because if you're eliminating foods or food groups, you may have a decreased nutrient source. You know, this could be decreased vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, or something more specific. And you also want to use caution with diets that increase food type intake. So I'm thinking about, you know, a popular diet years ago, like the cabbage diet. So if you're eating cabbage and you're not eating a lot of other things, you're missing out on other nutrients. What we have found as dietitians is that usually lifestyle changes are best However, if you want to try a diet that's popular today, make sure that you talk with your health provider, and so they can help you maybe make adjustments that should be considered for SMA and for your specific individual history and background. Okay, one other thing I wanted to talk about is about knowing your numbers. So it is so important as an adult to know what your blood pressure is and to know if you're within the normal range. You know, I have the ranges on here on the slide. You know, if you're higher than these numbers or lower than these numbers, you'll want to be working with your medical provider on a plan. Body mass index. So this is your weight divided by your weight in kilograms divided by your height in centimeters squared. There are calculators available online if you want to know your body mass index, and you can just plug in what you need to know are your height and your weight, and they can tell you what your BMI would be. We recommend that for adults that your BMI is less than 25. The lower end will probably be more determined to where you are at with SMA, and if you have a lot of lean mass or less lean mass, that would affect your lower range for your BMI. But definitely above a BMI of 25, you would be at risk for overweight. Fasting blood sugar, we always want to check to see that blood sugar level. If you're starting to range toward the higher levels, it could mean that you are, have prediabetes. If you range toward the lower levels, we may have concern of hypoglycemia, and your healthcare provider can help you with ideas if you're going, high or low in either of those ranges. Vitamin D, I will always do a vitamin D with my patients every 1 to 2 years. We like them to be in the 30 to 50 range. We don't want those above, I try to tend towards more the 40, 50 range. Vitamin D comes from sunlight. It can also come from foods like mushrooms or fish with bones in them. But we'll often see, this is one where we'll often see supplementation, not just with SMA, but with a lot of adults, we'll see vitamin D supplementation. So you really just want to do, a 25 hydroxy vitamin D lab at least every 1 to 2 years to see where you fall on that. Total cholesterol. This is something that the American Heart Association recommends that we do for younger adults every 5 years. Once you're 45 for men and 55 for women, then they recommend that every 1 to 2 years. So they'll do a lipid panel. And so that will include total cholesterol, your high density lipoproteins, and your triglycerides in that panel. The HDL is something that's a little unique in that the higher, the better. And for women, they recommend closer to that 50 range. For men, they recommend that you're higher than 40. For triglycerides, this is something that is really affected by diet and exercise. It can also be affected by alcohol. If you're in levels greater than 200 milligrams per deciliter, it really increases your risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, heart attack, and stroke. So you'll want to work with your healthcare provider if your triglycerides are high. One thing that we found is if you're decreasing your intake of added sugars and exercising, that this will help improve triglyceride levels. And then we'll do other labs just as indicated. So a complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, generally every 1 to 2 years. I know that we do this in our practice annually. We'll do labs like this. And then others as indicated. So that just means if your eating history is one in which you're not eating, a lot of iron, we might check to make sure your iron level looks okay. So as we get to the close, we're getting really close to our open question and answer period. The main points of questions that I wanted you to take home with you today is that there's really no one best diet for SMA. You will really want to set yourself up for success by meal planning, keeping healthy foods in your environment and accessible to you, And it's really a lifestyle approach. You want to make small changes into lifetime habits. Don't try to overhaul everything at once. If you can just make one small habit change and keep it for your life, you're making a difference. And you want to, where you can, let your family and friends and caregivers know so that you can help to achieve these goals. So I wanted to thank you all for your time and attention today. We're happy to open this up to the panel with Stacy and Laura to answer any questions that you might have in the chat, please.
Thank you so much, Becky, for such a great and informative presentation. I'm going to ask Becky if you don't mind stopping to share your screen with the slides, and then Stacy and Laura, please hop on video. Perfect. And thank you everyone for joining in today. We will get started with the Q&A session. So I know you all provided a couple of handouts in the files tab, but a few people have been asking if they could have some of the links you listed in the PowerPoint presentation available, as well as if you could make the slides available in a PDF afterwards. Is that possible?
Yes, I'm happy to make the slides available in the PDF. And what I'll do is after this discussion is over, I'm happy to copy and paste my links into the chat.
Great, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, and then our next question that we got in is, when you were referring to you were on the special diet slide, and someone was just wondering if you could clarify what you were meaning when you were referring to separating calcium from the other supplements.
Oh yeah, so if you're needing to take in your diet a multivitamin and a calcium supplement, and your multivitamin has iron, I would take that a couple hours away from when you're taking your calcium supplement, or vice versa. I would just not, Stacy or Laura, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the reason for this is that the calcium does inhibit absorption of iron. So if you're taking the multivitamin with iron and the calcium at the same time, you're not going to get all the benefits of the iron that's included in that multivitamin. That's often also why you won't see a lot of calcium in multivitamins with iron. Laura, anything else?
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. All right, our next question that came in is IMF, intermittent fasting, okay for SMA? I know it's eating for 8 hours and then fasting for 18 hours.
Yeah, so it depends on where, I want to hear what Stacy and Laura also have to say, but it really depends on your severity of your symptoms and your status. For fasting, when I'm looking and talking with people about fasting, I really, it depends on what their nutrition status is and the severity of their symptoms with SMA. And that'll help us to determine the fasting times that we would recommend for the intermittent fasting diet. Usually it's just, for at least my patients, we're just really watching, like not eating after a certain time at night, and then, just doing this overnight. Stacy or Laura?
I've had a few patients try this, and it can just be a sort of a popular way to cut out calories and eat less and lose weight. So it can be effective in that, but it does come with some risks. So again, depending on your situation, the amount of time you should be fasting in 24 hours is very individual. So to make sure you're talking with your team about that. So again, like Becky was saying, sticking to sort of a routine every day where you stop eating at a certain hour and you start eating at a certain time in the morning is okay. But I've had some young adults actually get into some trouble losing weight too quickly, being a little bit too restrictive with their eating with this intermittent fasting. I mean, actually got kind of in a dangerous situation. So I mostly just recommend, regular meal times, maybe 3 meals a day. Sometimes older kids, and young adults with neuromuscular disease only need to eat twice a day to get all their calories in if they have lower calorie needs. So again, just working with your team and your providers and letting them know what you're doing so we can work together to make it the healthiest for you.
And I would just add to that I would never recommend it for anyone who has had any history of low blood sugar, because when you're fasting for 18 hours, your body's really switching over to fat metabolism. I'm assuming that anyone who's wanting to do this has weight to lose. So I would never obviously recommend this for somebody who's very underweight, but I'm assuming they wouldn't do it anyway. But again, if there's any history of low blood sugars, I would not recommend this at all.
Great. Thank you all so much for answering that question. Our next questions keep coming in, so thank you all for being on here. This is a two-part question. What does low creatine mean for SMA patients? And then second part, is creatine supplement recommended?
Is this creatine or creatinine?
I could be pronouncing that wrong.
Says
so I
creatine.
It says
Okay.
creatine, okay. But a lab that's commonly checked is creatinine. Becky, do you have an answer for that one?
Yeah, well, if we're, it depends on what we're talking about. So if we're talking about the lab, then that can generally, if we're talking about the lab, that can be low. For creatinine, it can be low, and I don't normally do anything with that for the lab creatinine, but for creatine, sometimes if I don't have anybody with SMA on creatine supplement, but I know that for some of our other neuromuscular diseases that we sometimes will supplement with creatine, maybe about 0.1 gram per kilo per day, but I don't know. I would have to look up and I can post in the chat what that upper range would be for that.
Yeah,
do you have
that's not a
anything
lab we routinely check or supplement for at where I work. So.
Yeah, we do not either. I'm wondering if they're thinking about low creatinine. And with that lab, that is something that is often, a low creatinine is often seen with patients who have reduced muscle mass. Yeah. So it would not be uncommon to see a low creatinine level in patients with SMA, and it is part of the disorder and maybe not even really correctable.
Right? Yeah, yeah,
just kind of accepted.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for discussing that. So our next question is, what should someone take for osteoporosis?
Oh, okay. So for osteoporosis, I strongly recommend, when we're preventing, we're trying to build up the bone health before we get to the point of osteoporosis. We're looking at our bone health nutrients. So we're looking at calcium, maximizing our calcium intake within our ranges. We're looking at vitamin D, we're looking at vitamin K, and magnesium are the bone health nutrients that I generally tend to maximize. For somebody with osteoporosis, we would look at, there are some medications that your doctor may prescribe to you. We also may do, oh my goodness, the name has just escaped me. Help me out, ladies. For frequent fractures.
Are you talking about bisphosphonates?
Yes, thank you. Bisphosphonates.
Those would be prescribed by an endocrinologist, yes. Usually, though.
Yes.
So if you truly already have osteoporosis, hopefully you're being followed by an endocrinologist, and you wouldn't just be trying to supplement yourself, or even getting the advice from a dietitian, because sometimes they are using other medications for those that have to be prescribed by a doctor.
Right. Yeah. And generally, before we do the bisphosphonates, we're making sure we're maximizing the other nutrient intakes as well. Mm-hmm. Anything different, Laura?
No, be saying also just if you're underweight, maybe just getting your weight up to a healthy weight and eating enough protein and calories can just help with overall bone health as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all so much. All right. Our next question that came in, is there anything you would recommend eating or avoiding to help with swelling in the ankles and legs due to sitting frequently and not walking?
Okay.
I think just making sure your fluid intake is adequate, either not too much or not too little. So make sure you're getting enough fluids, and even sodium is similar. Like you don't want to be getting too little or too much sodium. So talking to your team about fluids and sodium, because that helps with fluid shifts in your body.
Mhm. Yeah, so making sure that your electrolytes are checked. And the whole thing with electrolytes like sodium and potassium and things like that, it really is all about balance in the body. So you don't want them too high, you don't want them too low, you want them in the normal range. And so checking that out, and then asking the physician, what their recommendations would be about that.
Yeah.
But also, eating like a moderate sodium diet, not, you have to have some sodium in your diet, but not overdoing it. Maybe leaving out added salt or something, and just because many of the processed foods and things that we eat already have a lot of sodium in them.
Right. I don't have anything to add. I agree.
Thank you all so much. All right, our next question we have is, what can we take for inflammation?
So generally, I am a strong advocate of foods. So healthy foods, so fruits, vegetables, eating the rainbow of colors. If you're talking about like being anti-inflammatory, these healthy foods will help with them, can help with being anti-inflammatory.
Also including, some foods that are high in omega-3 essential fatty acids, like the salmon or other fatty fish also can help.
Yeah. Omega-3s are a great anti-inflammatory.
Thank you all so much. Okay, I am going to try to pronounce this correctly, so bear with me. Can you give a little bit more information about LCarnitine?
LCarnitine.
Oh yeah, carnitine.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So what, and I think add on to this if I say anything that's different maybe from your practices. So we usually will supplement with carnitine if free and total carnitine levels are low. So what carnitine is it's an amino acid that helps to transport long chain fats into the cell to burn fat for energy. And it's concentrated in muscle. And so if we have a low free and total carnitine level, we'll supplement generally about 2 to 3 grams top a day. If you get too much, you can have like a fishy odor or a foul smell, and we'll usually divide it up throughout the day. Anything to add, Stacy or Laura?
We've had some patients who we've seen low levels. We've tried supplementation. The supplementation doesn't quite agree with them. Like we know that people with reduced muscle mass are going to have lower carnitine levels. I think if I check carnitine levels in most of my SMA patients, they're probably going to be low, especially people with who are on the weaker end with SMA. So, I mean, if the person can tolerate the supplement, we'll supplement a bit, but sometimes we just live with it.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. All right. I know we're getting down to a little bit of time left, so we've got a couple more questions. Our next question is, how much magnesium should we take?
That's a good question. I like to maximize magnesium intake through foods. And so I always tell people chocolate is a good source of magnesium. Not that I'm advocating all we eat is chocolate, but chocolate does contain magnesium. Nuts, leafy greens are going to have beans. Am I leaving out any foods here? Some supplements for calcium will have vitamin D and magnesium in them.
Yeah, it's age dependent as well. So we could put a link in the chat because it's very specific.
Yeah.
And sometimes people take magnesium to help with constipation. So if you take too much, probably the main side effect will be some diarrhea.
Yeah. And actually, I think that, even, when you're looking at the recommendations for supplement intake, they really want to have people limit the amount of magnesium that they actually get from supplements. There's less of a limit on the magnesium that you get from food, but they are cautious about supplements.
Yeah, you want to be really careful. And Stacy, I think this was one of your professors that had said this, like, eat whole foods wherever you can, because supplements are only things that have been discovered yet. And there may be things that we don't know about that are in whole foods that would be beneficial.
Exactly.
Right? Is that?
Yes. I always remember that. Like how many, supplements only contain the vitamins and minerals that have been discovered. What else is in food that we don't know about? So that's why we're proponents of food.
Great. Thank you all so much. All right, moving along, next question we have is, Becky, you had mentioned cereals, meal replacement bars, and et cetera. They found it difficult to find ones with lower sugar and less additives. Do you have any particular brands you recommend?
Yeah, so just something that I do in the grocery store, I really like this now for the ready-to-eat cereals. They have it right on the front of the box, so you can just pretty much compare the added sugars in each of them. As far as the ready to go cereals, I generally, so I know Stacy has a go-to meal replacement bar, so maybe I'll let her talk about it. I think what we had kind of discussed is what's important is to have one that you'll eat, that tastes good to you.
Yeah, I mean, some of the kind bars are okay because they're more nuts and less sugar. I found one that I mean, I'm not a big fan of bars. I don't really like the way they taste, but I did find one in Alaska that I really liked the taste of, but they are available on Amazon. It's called like Kate's Organic something or other, but it has oats and chocolate and things like that. But in terms of cereals, I do actually, so we can all sort of say what's in our cereal bowls, but my sort of go-to cereal is Nature's Path Heritage Flakes, which are pretty low sugar, really high in fiber, made with all whole grains. So that's what I eat for cereal, as well as steel cut oats. Becky, what's in your bowl?
So we have shredded wheat. We have shredded wheat in my house and steel cut oats. And the meal replacement bars, I think, are the Kate's Real Food Organic Energy Bars.
Yep.
In my office, I keep a box of Kind bars. I like those for myself. Laura?
Or yours.
Well, okay, I love good old fashioned plain Cheerios. But I like the Cascade Farms granolas. And then bars, again, like along with what the other two are saying, I think we're all encouraging food and whole foods, but bars can be useful if you're in a hurry or you're on the go or whatever. So there's so many to choose from, just finding one and maybe a variety. So get a different kind each time too. But the other brands they mentioned, I like the Kind bars. But again, some of them can be actually really high in calories and you might not need that. So maybe look for a lower calorie version, but mixing it up seems to help because they get boring over time.
and the other one too is the Lara bars, aren't they the ones that have they only have a few ingredients, right? And though they may be high in sugar, the sugar is coming from, I believe,
from
dates.
The foods.
Yeah, it's coming from dates, so at least you're getting fiber and everything from that.
Great, thank you all. I think we've got time for just one last question here. So our last question is, what should be the ideal L-carnitine intake per day? I did not pronounce that right.
So that's the same levocarnitine that we were talking about before. Becky, you had recommended an amount, right?
Yeah, I don't think we go higher than 2 or 3 grams, and then we would divide that daily. And definitely talk to your doctor before doing anything like that.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for Becky and Laura and Stacy for taking the time to answer all these amazing questions. And thank you to everyone who listened in and submitted their questions. You are able to submit questions in that chat box throughout the conference. And I know Becky, Laura, and Stacy, if they have time, they'll pop in and answer questions, or we'll also send them to the speakers to see if they can answer them as well. So again, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Becky, Stacy, and Laura for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
There is a survey linked in the session page, and you'll also be receiving a follow-up email with that survey link, and we welcome any feedback that you have to share with us. Once again, we are incredibly thankful for the support from our sponsors for really making the 2021 virtual SMA conference possible. Please be sure to join us this evening, please be sure to join us shortly for the virtual exhibit hall happening at 11:30, so in just a couple minutes, and it'll run till 1:30 Central Time. You can check out all of the booths, connect with the exhibitors, see the products that they have, and then the more times you enter a booth, the more times you will be entered to win a prize, and those winners will be announced Friday evening at the closing session. Thank you all so much again for joining. Have a great day, and if there's anything that we can do, you can always email us at familysupport@curesma.org. Have a great day, and thank you for joining us for the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference.
Bye.
Bye.